I mean, what the fuck? You can't write this shit. Well, clearly you can, 'cause that's what they did. But seriously, what the fuck? Hello there, hoppers, and welcome to this first thoughts video of Disney's The Lion King 2019 version. So, it's basically a remake. That's what I can say. I mean, I've just seen it, and what is there to say? If you're a fan of the original, you're probably going to like this one because it's practically the same film. I mean, what do you expect, really? You know, I didn't go into the film expecting anything new, and you know, I expected to get a CGI remake of the original, and that's pretty much what we got. I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad thing. I mean, personally, I prefer the original, and I'm not a fan of CGI anyway, but in terms of Disney and their current trend of pretty much they're doing their live action phase, I know The Lion King doesn't have... I mean, alright, so my criticism is The Lion King doesn't have any live-action possibilities because you can't really train the animals to do what you want, and there's no people characters. It's not like with The Jungle Book. With The Jungle Book, I could just about forgive because it actually has a human character. So that's your live-action... moment, shall we say. That's your live action grasp. You can claim live action because you have a physical actor, you know, acting in the scenes. With The Lion King, it's all CGI, so it's very tricky. It's pretty much just the original, but it's an updated skin palette, really. You know. But was it a bad film? Well, no, because it's The Lion King. You can't really go wrong. You know, it's a pretty good film anyway. Like, I'm a huge fan of the original. The original was one of my favourite films, you know, of all time. Not just animations. I just think the film is such a great film anyway. And I know a lot of people have problems with it, and you know, like, believe it or not, a lot of people do, because obviously it's resemblance to other films and literature and stuff. But it's like Star Wars. You know, you borrow from things and you make it original. But anyway, it's a story for another time. The point I'm trying to make is, being such a hardcore fan of the original, it's very difficult for me to kind of accept a remake of a film that, again, I just didn't deem necessary. It's kind of like Aladdin, but I can kind of forgive Aladdin because, again, they're going through their phase of making everything live action, and because, again, Aladdin has actual human characters in it, you can make it live action, so you can have an adaptation. But with The Lion King, it's a different kind of kettle of fish because everything kind of has to be animated. So that's when you kind of say, can we really translate this to live action? And the answer is no, not really, because everything's CGI, which is not live action. However, in terms of this new phase, this new skin change, whatever you want to call it, I think they do a pretty good job, you know, all things considering. Don't get me wrong, I'm still a fan of the original more so. I still prefer the 2D animation. I think the 2D animation is stunning. But I must admit, as for someone who doesn't like CGI at all, they did a pretty good job here. Like, I was quite convinced in a couple of shots. I actually thought to myself, did they actually get a lion to just stand there and they filmed it? But obviously deep down I knew it was all fake. But that's kind of compliments to the departments that kind of worked from the film, because the CGI was gorgeous. It was stunning. Like I said, at times it was so photorealistic. It was uncanny. So that's a positive to take from the film. I think the film was well executed in regards to the appearance of the animals, but it wasn't exactly a perfect version of this film. But I'll get to that in a minute. Let's look at a few more positives first. So, performances weren't bad. Beyonce didn't distract from the film. It wasn't a gimmick. I think she did a good job. It was nice to see James Earl Jones back, obviously as Mufasa. And I think everyone else did a pretty decent job. I didn't even mind Seth Rogen. I hate Seth Rogen. But I think he did a fine job as Pumbaa. I didn't care. It didn't distract from the film. It didn't really bother me. too much that he was in the film, so that's good. You know, when a character blends into their character, you know, they don't stick out as an actor or whoever they are. They don't just stick out as that person. They actually blend into their character. Then you know they've done a good job. So overall, I'd say the performances were pretty decent. So I can't really complain. The songs, they used a lot of songs from the original film, in terms of like they did remakes of those songs, as you'd expect. And I think those versions were pretty decent. The only criticism I will have is, the only real criticism is basically there seems to be a trend. I noticed it with Aladdin, again, bringing up Aladdin, but I noticed it with Aladdin. They seem to slow the songs down for the live action versions. It's hard to explain, but if you've got them side by side, you kind of know what I mean in the sense of the line delivery's a bit slower and maybe there's a couple of extra bars added to the song just to make it a bit slower pacing. I don't know, it's hard to explain, but I can hear it. I can definitely hear that it's slower than the original songs. And I noticed it with Aladdin. I just thought, oh, that's probably just so they can kind of get the choreography going on in the scene, just to give them a bit more time to respond to stuff. Because it isn't animation. But with The Lion King, obviously, it is animation, it's CGI, so there's no real need to slow it down. If you've got a problem with pacing and timing, you can kind of just animate it quicker or something. You know, you get the idea. It's not as precious, shall we say, because you literally have full creative control to change every detail. But it's just a little observation I made. But no, I thought the covers were pretty good. I thought the songs were pretty nice. I'll get to the music, actually, in a minute. But, you know, again, let's just try and talk about a few more positives. Scar. So, let's talk about Scar. So, again, with Aladdin, I should have done a first thoughts video on that film, really, because I had a fair bit to say. Maybe I still will, maybe further up the line. But I thought Jafar was awful in Aladdin. Like, I didn't think he was intimidating at all. But what they did well here is, I think Scar was pretty decent. I think, you know, Jeremy Irons was better in the original, of course. I'm partial to the original, and I think he had the voice for it. But I think this guy did a pretty good job. You know, he was still intimidating, and for the most part, yeah, you know, felt like a decent villain. So I can't really complain with that. But in terms of Scar, actually, which I'll get onto the script in a minute, but basically there are parts of the script where they kind of added to. So let me just say this now. So just a criticism I'll quickly say now is the script was very disappointing. So for the most part, they seem to use the original script, but then they kind of unnecessarily took things away and unnecessarily added a few things for good measure. It's pretty much like being in school. You know, everyone's got that friend who they kind of, maybe they've done like an essay and it's due in tomorrow and they're just like, oh, please, I'm struggling here. Can I just look at your work and then it will help me write mine? So out of sympathy, you kind of give them your work and they kind of pretty much rewrite your essay, but they change like a couple of words to make it, you know, to make it their own work. You know, we've all got friends like that. I certainly did, otherwise I wouldn't have got through school. But no, I'm joking. But no, basically, let's put it this way. It's like anything really, isn't it? In college and uni and stuff, you know, you find an article and you're like, oh, that's perfect for this piece of work. But you have to try and reword it in such a way that it isn't copying. That kind of feels how they approached this script. They pretty much had the old script and they were told, change it just enough to make it different. But some of the changes are embarrassing. It's like they practically say the same damn words, but then change a couple, and it kind of feels really forced. I don't know, it's hard to explain unless you watch the film, but personally for me, like I said, I thought the performances were decent, but the script I thought was poor. I actually thought was poor. No pun intended. I thought it was a pretty bad script. Like I'm actually watching the film. I'm sitting there watching the film, and as they're talking about, as they're saying certain lines, I couldn't give you an example. I'd have to wait for the film to be released and replay the clip. But there was this certain line that I can't for the life of me remember. I remember sitting there going, you should have said blah, 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 and then that would have made more sense, and that would have been a better segue. And that's whilst I'm watching a film. I don't normally think about that stuff till afterwards, like now, when I'm, reminiscing for the sake of a video or talking to my mates about it. But the fact that I was genuinely sitting there rewriting the script as I'm watching it, it was bad. That's bad. You know, that means it's not working as a script, especially when it touches so close on the original. You know, it's almost like a bad impression, which, again, with James L. Jones, they brought him back, which is great. I thought he did a decent performance. My only criticism really is, and again, I know a lot of people are going to be like, oh, anyone's going to compare the two films, of course they're going to be different. Yes, I know. But when you bring back the same actor and pretty much give them exactly the same fucking script, you might as well just use the fucking audio from the original. You know, change the script, and then I won't complain. But when you basically had the same actor delivering the same lines, but not as well, do you see what I mean? So again, he did a good job. Obviously, they were deliberately delivering it in a different way. But because we're all so familiar with the original, and it's the same damn voice, it don't sound right. It's almost like you're watching an alternate take. So, just a little bit of criticism there, you know, and I think it's a valid bit of criticism because, you know, some of the script... But the reason I mention the script now is for a positive. So one of the positives is we actually get a little bit more of a insight to Scar and Mufasa's relationship. And it's one word that does it. So in an overall bad script, in my opinion, a script that pretty much tries hard to update the original without much effort. I'm surprised the guy even got a credit for writing it, to be fair. That's how little is changed. And the changes that were made are just, you know, eye-rolling, really. But we get to that. But for now, there is one thing that I must say I did like. And it's just a simple word. It's an added bit of word, but God, does it add more impact to the story. So, as you should be familiar, there is a line in the original film where Mufasa gets angry at Scar because he's confronting him about not showing up for Simba's coronation or whatever it's called. You know, his moment where they're all, you know, praising the king at the beginning, the new King Simba. Well, the king to be, but you get the idea. And... you know, he's like, you know, don't turn your back on me kind of thing, this, that, and the other. They're having a bit of a moment, and Mufasa roars at me, says, "Is that a challenge?" And in the original, he goes, like, temper, I wouldn't dream of challenging you. And then he says about the whole brute strength, and he has the lion's share when it comes to intelligence. Well, in this film, they pretty much add an extra line, only a subtle one. He basically says the same thing, "Is that a challenge?" And then Scar says the same, pretty much exactly the same dialogue. But then he says, "I wouldn't dream of challenging you. Not again." He literally says like something like, I swear he said, "Not again." And that adds so much more depth because you can see the scar on his eye and the fact that he's kind of like, "I wouldn't dream of challenging you. Not again." Suddenly, that one fucking line adds so much more depth to the characters because now we're thinking, fucking hell, now we know how he got the scar. It doesn't matter what the previous laws have said, like the previous extra books or what people have said or what even the animator said from the original. In this version of the film, it is clear he once challenged for dominance, like lions do, and he lost. And that creates so much more of a relationship status. You know, Scar isn't just jealous of his brother, but he's infuriated because he actually lost the right to become king to Mufasa. That's what I take from it. That's at least how it sounds based on that one line. And that's what I mean, just a little bit of extra dialogue added and it makes so much more of a difference, so much more to go on, and in a way creates a whole new backstory for the two brothers. But maybe I'm looking too far into it. But the point still stands is, you know, that's an example of adding to dialogue in a good way. But a lot of the time it's kind of taken away or added in a bad way. But like I said, we'll get to that. So of course it's an emotional film. You know, if you go watch it, I cried a couple of times, as you'd expect. Having to relive the trauma that is Mufasa's death. And it was very upsetting. I think it could have been done a little better, but again, I'll get to that. But yeah, it still got me. I'm not going to lie. I cried quite a few times in that film. And, you know, I think we kind of need to move on to negatives here. So I've said a few good things. I'm afraid there is more negative than positive, but there's always going to be. It's a remake, essentially. It's a remake that didn't need to happen. So that just, by definition alone, it's not really an original film to discuss. And like I've already explained, in terms of adaptation, it's pretty much the same film. They haven't really done much to change it. Even visually, a lot of the shots are shot for shot. And that's obviously deliberate, but some things are... I'll tell you what, they've changed some things. Let's go back to the script, because I feel that's where I keep coming back to. So, I don't know if it's the script or part of the direction. Obviously, Jon Favreau's done some really great work. He did, obviously, he's obviously known more for his Marvel stuff like Iron Man, but let's not forget he's done The Jungle Book with Disney, and I must admit I quite liked The Jungle Book. I quite enjoyed it, and I never liked the cartoon. So, obviously, I was probably a lot more lenient with that film just because I didn't really care for the original. This is different. I'm very partial, to the original. So it's very hard to, it kind of accept that it's kind of been re-envisioned. But that's the thing. Most of the film isn't re-envisioned or reimagined. Most of it is pretty much a carbon copy, but not in a good way. It's kind of like, it's sort of the same film, but not as good. It's one of those films, you're going to have to see it. I mean, watch it. It's enjoyable. Don't get me wrong. It's an enjoyable experience. A lot of people are like, oh, this is The Lion King for the new generation. Even then, I disagree. Watch the original. The original is still a million times better. But if this film had to be made, I guess it isn't the worst it could have been made. I think that's probably the best compliment I can give it. I think Aladdin was a pretty good film for a live action version of the film, because it was very different from the cartoon, but at the same time was still very enjoyable, and I felt was probably one of the best Disney live action films they've done so far in terms of the remake, in terms of their current run. Not overall. I mean, in terms of their current run of remaking their classics into live action. Does this beat Aladdin? I think in a lot of ways it does, just because I think it's a more faithful adaptation. But I think in terms of originality, in terms of it being its own film, Aladdin still wins, because Aladdin was Aladdin deviated a lot more from the cartoon than this does from the original Lion King. Which again brings me back onto the script, so let's just get this out of the way. So, I think with the script, the best example I can really think of is, off the top of my head, is probably The Amazing Spider-Man. And what I mean by that is, in The Amazing Spider-Man, when Sony rebooted the franchise, they had that whole speech with Uncle Ben where he's talking about, it's not choice, it's responsibility. It basically gives a massive speech to try not to say, with great power comes great responsibility. Like, they're trying to make their own way of saying it. They're trying to replicate the speech without replicating the speech, but they still kind of end up doing it. They just kind of, instead of a line of dialogue, it's a paragraph, yeah? That's pretty much what this film felt like at times. It's kind of like they felt the need to ad-lib after every other word to make the script different, and that bothered me, because I was just thinking, either follow the script or change the script. Don't take bits that... I think they took too much from the original script and then just tried to extend it. And some of that's visual as well. Some of the visual, it almost feels like they're trying to deliberately be different. And again, I'm sounding maybe a bit contradictory, but it's just I'm not getting the words out properly. What I'm trying to say is, either use the script or don't. By all means, you can take a few lines from a script, because that becomes a tribute or, a nod to nostalgia. But when you take practically 90%, when you keep 90% of the original script, but then 10% is adding lib and adding a couple of bits here, it becomes really, really off. Because, like I said, 90% of what you're hearing is the same. But then that other 10% is kind of fucking with your system, because you're like, is this an alternate take, or do you see what I mean? It doesn't feel right. So for someone who knows the script of the original so damn well, because I watch it so much, it was difficult for me to kind of hear that ad-libbed moments, because it was like they're saying the original lines and then adding more to it, and I'm just like... And like I said, sometimes it worked with the whole, I wouldn't dream of challenging you, not again. That worked, but then most of it didn't. and I'm trying to think of examples, but I'm just giving you my genuine first thoughts of when I watched the film. And I'll have to probably do a proper review one day when I get the clips and maybe compare the clips together, and you'll see what I mean, a bit more. But maybe it's not as, maybe in comparison they're a lot more different than I remember. But the point is, these are my first thoughts, and this is how I feel right now. I feel like the script was pretty much replicated, with the exception of a couple of ad libs, and those ad libs kind of threw me off a bit. So I didn't think it was necessary, and I think that's the word. It wasn't necessary to add those extra moments just for the sake of trying to be original, because it's never going to be original. You're still using 90% of the fucking original script. And it's the same with the music. They reused the music from the original film. They kept claiming, oh, we got Hans Zimmer back to do the music. Did you? Did you really? Or did he just simply give you a CD of the original? Because the musical scores, don't get me wrong, they are great and they do get the emotion going, but they sounded too much like the originals. Now, again, it's kind of like, if you've got a famous bit of music, by all means reuse it. But I think the best example here I can think of is Jurassic World. Okay, now Jurassic World, for all intents and purposes, is pretty much like a soft reboot of the original. I know it continues the story, but in a lot of ways it's sort of remaking the film, in some ways. Now, it has its own theme song, and yet it still implements every now and then a bit of nostalgia with the old theme. But that's the point. It uses bits of the old theme. It doesn't rely on it. It has its own theme. Now, I know, granted, this is pretty much a remake, reboot, whatever you want to call it, but, so they can kind of, we can use all the old music because it's not a sequel. But at the same time, all I can think of is, where's the updated music? I don't know. I mean, it's like Aladdin, really. Aladdin, again, I keep saying Aladdin, but I think it's the most recent one. That's why, it's the most recent example other than this that I can think of. So Aladdin was a good example of using pretty much the old scores, but they're new, updated, revamped versions. They're reimagined versions of the scores, so they are different. This film, literally, note for note, sounds like they just played the CD off the old film. And it wouldn't surprise me if they did, because there is one thing that was inexcusable in the whole film. No matter how much it gave me the tingles in the cinema, it's not an excuse for doing it. And that is the opening shot. So the opening shot starts with the music, right? The iconic song, yeah? Circle of Life. Now, when it starts, on the opening shot, you hear the, you hear all that going on. And it's the original. It is the original track. Backing track and all, it is the original. 100%, I don't care what anyone says, it is the same fucking song. 100%. 175.1% sure that is the same fucking track. It just is. It's not even a debate. It is. They use the same fucking song from the original, except for when the lead singer starts singing. So basically what they did is they got the backing track from the original and then just changed the lead singer. And it feels like a dodgy karaoke version. It really does, because the person doesn't sound like the last person. Obviously that's the point. But because everyone else is the same, it kind of feels like she's just added herself into the film, you know what I mean? She just kind of, this is my own karaoke version and they used it. It's pretty much the best way to describe it. It feels like karaoke. It feels like I've grabbed the original backing track and sung over it, because that's pretty much exactly what they've done. Redo the whole song. Brand new, you know what I mean? But no. And when the film started, I was confused. I was like, they're actually using the original, like the whole original. And then when the woman started singing, I was like, oh, that's not the original. But the backing track still was, even the music. So I was just like, it's just laziness. So yeah, in terms of the music and in terms of definitely the script, cutting a lot of corners, people. Cutting a lot of corners, and that's to say the least. So, of course, there are things going on in the film as well, like there are some changes. They did actually make some changes, but I can't help but think these changes are a bit pointless. One of them, for example, fuck knows what she's called, but Scar is not the leader of the hyena posse, okay? He's not the leader, not at first, and never really is. So basically what happens is he goes and seeks out the hyenas, who are kind of ruled by this female hyena, and kind of gets them on his side. He basically convinces them to back him to be king, and join his team, basically to join his plot to kill Mufasa and Simba, and of which they oblige. But oh yeah, and I tell you, that scene's cringy for me anyway, because they kind of don't want to do the Scar song, and I don't know why. I know a lot of people don't seem to like that song. Am I the only person who likes the Scar song from the original? Am I the only person? But either way, they kind of do a half-assed version of it. He basically says a couple of lines from it. They change a lot of the lines, but it's not sung, it's kind of spoken. And it basically just ends with, be prepared, be prepared, be prepared. It's like, oh God, it's embarrassing. So I didn't like that. But yeah, so he gets them on board, and, he basically has to convince them to join his team. Now, that irritates me because I'm probably wrong, but I feel the only reason they've done it is so that Nala, at the end of the film, whilst Simba's fighting Scar, Nala, a female protagonist, has a little bit of a moment to shine by fighting this big bad female hyena. I feel like they've only created this character so Nala's got something more to do in the final scene. I'm probably wrong, but in a world where everything has to be PC, it wouldn't surprise me, okay? It didn't offend me too much, but I rolled my eyes a little because it wasn't in the original film. It just wasn't. Why do we need to add a new character? There was nothing wrong with Scar being the leader of the hyenas in the original film, and I think it worked better because it said a lot more to Scar's character. The fact that he couldn't rule the lions, he went and ruled the hyenas instead. That shadowy place was Scar's kingdom, and it was a great, staple and a great statement on him as a character. His character kind of fitted that profile of someone who is obsessed to the point where he must rule something. He must rule. Pretty much like the Master in Doctor Who. It doesn't matter really who he's ruling as long as he's a king or a leader of some sorts. Always creating an army to lead, because he can't inherit one. He has to pretty much make his own. And that's where he seeks out the hyenas. But instead, that whole character arc of Scar, where he's clearly manipulated them for years, just gets flushed down the bog for the sake of this new character who no one cares about. Just for the sake of, like I said personally, just for the sake of giving Nala someone to fight at the end of the film. So, again, I'm probably wrong, but I just felt it was a bit unnecessary, and again, it's just changes for the sake of changes. And it weren't one that the film benefited from, in my opinion. So, why do it? And speaking of pointless changes, there was a moment with Rafiki, the monkey. I'm probably saying that wrong, I apologise. And basically, he normally has a stick, okay? So he normally has his stick, trademark, yeah? He's got his stick with his mango things dangling from him. Bloody hell. But, Jesus. Could you imagine a stick with the balls dangling from him? It's like, fucking hell. But no. So that's not in the film. The fruit's not even in the film, to be fair, like in terms of what he actually uses. At one scene he's eating something, but in the original film, Rafiki not only has his stick, like he has his stick that he uses to walk with, because he's obviously an old man, old monkey, and he also has like these melons or something, these fruits that he cracks open, and the red cream filling, shall we say, like the red juice. That's what he puts over Simba to mark him as obviously the new king, well, the future king. And that's also what he uses to create his little cave painting later on in the film when he realises Simba's alive. He gets the red and puts it round him as if to say, to give him the fur, as if to say, it is time, he's alive. and it's a great moment. And again, it's a definitive part of his character, the fact that he's got, you know, these big ass melons that he paints with and stuff. But in this film, again, change for the sake of change. They feel the need to take those melons. I'm sorry, I'm a child. They take the melons, they say, sod those melons. We're going to give him a root instead. It's a red root, probably from a tree or a plant. He rips it, and it's all dusty, and he puts it on Simba, and it hardly even goes on him because it's dust. And I'm just like, this is why he used liquid in the original, right? Because then it would actually stick. It would actually stay on. You know, and again, why change it? Why not have the crack of the mango, whatever it is? I keep saying mango, God knows what it is. Paste it on. What was wrong with that? Why change it to red roots? Is it more realistic? And then later on, when he's making the kind of the cave drawing on his tree, you know, that kind of etching the thing, he doesn't even get they don't even give him the respect of that. Instead, a load of bugs have to kind of go on the spot, and he blows them away or crushes them. I can't remember. I just remember there being a load of bugs. He moves them out of the way, and all of a sudden there's a half-assed picture of Simba. And I'm just like, right? I just feel like these directors sometimes make things overcomplicated. What was wrong with him having a little laugh to himself, drawing it himself on the tree? What was wrong with that? Why do we have to overcomplicate it and say all these bugs are in on it? You know, it's, I don't know. I don't fucking know. Pointless change for the sake of a pointless change. And, you know, and that brings me on to his stick. So, yeah, his stick, right? It's supposed to be this big deal. He always has it with him, and obviously in the original he fights with it at the end in a humorous manner. That's very reminiscent of, well, I should say, I was going to say Attack of the Clones with Yoda, you know, using the stick to walk, and then all of a sudden, wow! But technically, this was first, so really, Attack of the Clones probably copied this. But anyway, point I'm trying to make is, in this film, he does fight at the end, and he fights with his stick. But at the beginning of the film and all throughout, there's no stick. He literally has no stick. Nothing to help him walk with, nothing. And then right at the end, when there's the final fucking battle, he moves like a couple of rocks, I think, and pulls out this big-ass stick. And it looks as if to say, oh yeah, baby, we're back. And I'm just like, why didn't he fucking have the stick originally? Is that his killing stick? Because he's actually only brought it out for war. He doesn't use it to walk around anymore. He just brings it out when he needs to fucking smack the shit out of some hyenas. So, fuck knows, right? So that was a pointless change that I didn't like. I was just like, just either give him the stick or don't give him the stick. Jesus H. Christ. I've got another problem with that monkey and all. He's lazy in this film because in the original he stands up on his, you know, hind legs and shows off Simba to everyone. He's like, this is your future king. In this one he just sits there and goes, yeah, Simba, everyone. Simba, yeah, Simba. And puts him down again. No sense of awe. Which brings me on to my next point, really, to discuss, which is there was just lack of spectacle in some of these scenes. You know, when Simba assumes the throne at the end and he's walking, there are a lot more shots and a lot more build-up in the original. Like, they've got the feet, the head, everyone's looking up. There's a few of that in this. There's a few of those shots in this one, but to my knowledge, it didn't have half as much impact. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm remembering wrong. But all I remember is sitting there thinking, it's a nice wide shot, but they're holding on to it way too long when this is supposed to be a building moment. Show a few more shots. Now, don't get me wrong. I know less is more. You ain't got to show 1,000 shots a second. I think I've discussed this many times before in action films. Hold the shot if it looks better. But again, if it looks better. You ain't got to have 1,001 shots, but just a couple would do, rather than just this one shot. The music's building up, and it's kind of like, yeah, it's a wide shot, great. It's still the wide shot, okay. And now he's roaring. It's like, oh, fucking hell. Again, maybe I'm remembering it wrong, but I just remember being a little unsatisfied with that final moment where he assumes the throne. And I never stop being satisfied when I watch the original, so who knows. But I definitely feel there's a lack of spectacle in places in this film. You know, and I mean, like another scene, for example, you've got the romantic scene, you know, where obviously Nala meets up with him and she realises he's alive and they share a moment. In the original, There's this touching scene where they have a bit of a play. Nothing dodgy. And there's the song playing, Can You Feel the Love Tonight? So, in this film, it takes place during the day. During the fucking day! The song's called Can You Feel the Love Tonight? And it takes place during the fucking day! What were they thinking? How did you fuck that up? How? It's in the fucking title of the song! I mean, look, let's look at the original clip. Look, you can clearly see that it's set at night. Oh, it'll change in a minute. Anytime now. Oh, are you fucking kidding me? It happens at night. I swear it happens at night. I was only watching this film like 2 freaking days ago. Wow. Unfucking believable. I mean, the sun's setting, but that's not the same thing. I've seen this film 100 goddamn times, and I swear it happens at night. How did I get this wrong? My whole life revolves around attention to detail. How could I miss one so obvious? Okay, well, hands up, people. On this occasion, I'm wrong. All my previous points are still valid, and all the points to come are still valid, but on this occasion, I guess I'm wrong. Don't know how. And even though I can see that I'm wrong, I can still see it in my head, as clear as day. No, as at night. Fuck! Oh, I don't know anymore. Oh, Mandela effect confirmed, I'm telling you. Literally, I can see it in my head. The moon shining through the trees, even little freaking fireflies flying around them whilst they're, getting frisky. It's not here. Even there where Nala's trying new methods of persuasion, it would seem. Take me, Simba, take me. I swear it was nighttime. Maybe I'm thinking of the second film, with Kiara and Kovu. Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. Or maybe it's like, one of those, effects that I'm having. Like, because the title of the song is Can You Feel the Love Tonight, maybe I just assumed it was nighttime. But even so, why was the original not set at night? I mean, the song's called Can You Feel the Love Tonight, not Can You Feel the Love This Evening. So, moving on to another scene that is definitely in the film, because I've checked, definitely checked. There is a scene from the original film where Rafiki the monkey, he grabs these particles from the sky, basically like this wind streams coming through. He grabs like these little particles from it, gives it a smell, takes it back to his tree, does some like weird ritual on it, and comes to the conclusion that Simba's alive. And as weird as the sequence is, it's not a bad one. It's a welcome one for the film. However, the same cannot be said for the new version of this scene. Because, well, so it's a bit of fluff from Simba's fur. It's like a ball of fluff from Simba's fur. And let's just say it goes through a very shit process. And I mean shit process. The bit of fur actually gets swallowed and consumed by an animal. I think it's a giraffe. It gets shat out, and we watch a dung beetle for about 5 fucking minutes pushing it across the desert before the poor ass dung beetle, after all that effort, falls down like a little bit of a ditch so that the fucking shit splits in half and the fluff, somehow perfectly pristine, blows off again. Just for Rafiki and his tree to finally get given it by a load of ants. I mean, what the fuck? You can't write this shit. Well, clearly you can, because that's what they did. But seriously, what the fuck? Speaking of what the fuck, yeah, I know, it's a lot of water. I tell you, it's fucking hot here. It's in England, right? England. It's not supposed to be 31 degrees. It's supposed to be more like 13 on the hottest day of the year. It's supposed to be freaking minus 12 still, So, I'm melting in here. Whew. But yes, Speaking of hot shit. So yeah, literally, it comes out of a load of shit. I mean, what were they thinking? Literally, what were they thinking? Oh dear. But anyway, so yeah, just so scenes like that. Pointless. Pointless. And some of the stuff that we want to see, missing. So it definitely lost a lot of the spectacle, I think, of some of the scenes and some of the creativity. And yes, I'm not going to go too much into the song arrangements because, of course, things like I Just Can't Wait to Be King, they're not going to be as glamorous as the cartoon because the cartoon is very stylistic. There's a lot of colours going on and a lot of pantomime. There's a lot of the animals stacking on top of each other, making some kind of weird, like, fountain of animals. You know, it's, of course they're not going to do that in this version. Of course not. So things like that can be forgiven, but I just feel like it lacked spectacle in places, and that's a shame. It is a real shame, especially when, again, this is CGI, so there's no real excuse to kind of get it right. It's not like, well, we had limitations with the animals. No, you don't. It's CGI. Do what you need to do. Oh dear. But that actually brings me on to another point. And another sort of criticism, I guess, and that is realism. They were trying so hard, I think, to be realistic and faithful to the animals themselves. The whole film lacked emotion, dare I say. Even Mufasa's death, although I cried, it didn't have half the impact it has when you watch the original. And that's because, one word really, expression. There isn't much expression with these animals. And I know I'm not expecting them to go... I'm not expecting them to exaggerate it, but the eyes. Now, I'm a true believer in eyes telling 1,000 stories. If you get the eyes right, you get the emotion right, you get the expression right. You can tell a whole backstory in a stare if you do it right. They were just blank eyes, really. I mean, yeah, it's because they're animal eyes, granted, but I've looked into an animal's eyes before and I've seen something looking back at me. But when I kind of watched this film, all the eyes kind of seemed a bit dead. I didn't really feel like there was an emotion behind those eyes. Again, maybe I'm remembering it wrong, but I just remember, like, on Mufasa's death, they kind of replicate the shots from the original, and Simba's like, no! There isn't the, no! It's, no! No! Do I look concerned? No, I don't, do I? Because my eyes haven't fucking changed. Now, when a lion's trying to be intimidating, it does the proper with the creases in the eyes. There can be that emotion there. So don't tell me that they couldn't do anything with the eyes, not even a squint. And if they were trying to be too realistic, my argument would be compromise. You know, normally I'd try and be as realistic as possible, but in a film where you've got talking animals speaking pure English for the sake of the audience, I think you're allowed a little bit of a bit of liberty here and there, because at the end of the day, there are no human characters to connect with. The only characters we can relate to or connect with are these animals. So you have to make them somewhat relatable. And if we can't relate to them as animals, we need to at least relate to them from an emotional standpoint. And we can't do that if the emotion isn't believable. And the emotion will never be believable if it ain't in the fucking eyes. You with me, people? Yeah? Eyes tell a story. Without them, you can ruin one. That's all I'm saying. And speaking of story, there's a couple of things that, again, were changed, I feel, for the sake of this reality that we've just been discussing. And there's the whole, what do you want me to do? Dress and drag and do the hula? That's all been cut out, which is a shame, because I think it's such a great little bit of humour in the original film. But yes, I can forgive them for not doing it. I can understand why, because the meerkat, Timon, suddenly, this very realistic looking meerkat, suddenly grabbing a straw dress and maracas or whatever and dancing, to try and distract the hyenas would have been a bit out there in a film that otherwise never ventured far from the realms of possibility. So I can forgive them for replacing that. But did they really, really need the damn Disney reference, right? Talk about self-reference. So, I mean, this whole thing's been spoilers anyway. It is a warning in the title, but, just in case, and obviously if you haven't already seen the Lion King original, what you doing with your life, and this whole fucking film is the original practically, just not as good. So, hardly spoilers. We all know what happens. Mufasa dies. So, but instead of the dress and dragon do the hula, he gets all the hyenas' attention and he goes, B, ah, run! And they all run away. And everyone was like laughing in the cinema, and I'm just sitting there going, oh, dear, oh dear, oh dear. So now they've referenced Beauty and the Beast. I can see it now, people. Ladies and gentlemen, suddenly, forget about the Pixar theory. People are going to have their whole Disney theory if they haven't already. And I now know where this Lion King film stands. You'll probably find that in some person's bloody theory, this is proof. That one line is proof that Beauty and the Beast came first, which means the Lion King is based in the future. There we are, ladies and gentlemen. You heard it here first. If someone comes out with a shitty conspiracy about proof that the Lion King is later in life and all of our spirits become the animals, that's why we all speak and that's why we're civilized and somewhat anyway, and blah, 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 blah. And that's why they know about Beauty and the Beast. If something that bizarre comes out, you know that I fucking predicted it, okay? But there we are, moving on. But yeah, just, self-reference, right? It was sort of funny, but personally I just cringed. I was like, oh. And speaking of cringe, there was another moment where they kind of self-referenced themselves. In the Hakuna Matata song, when it's Pumbaa's moment, there's the bit normally where he goes, it's like, and I felt downhearted. How did you feel every time that Pumbaa, not in front of the kid. They cut that out, and instead it was every time that I farted. Are you gonna stop me? No, I'm not gonna stop you. Disgust me. That was how it was delivered. I'm like, right. So what you're basically doing is you're mocking the original because the original cut the line and said not in front of the kid, which I think's funnier. But they thought they were being clever by getting him to say the whole line and never getting stopped. And he actually looks at Timon and says, "You're not going to stop me?" And he's like, "No, I'm not. You disgust me." If he says, no, I'm not. You disgust me. Wouldn't that be more reason to have stopped him if it disgusts him? But I don't know. It was just another example of trying to trick the audience. It's like, oh, he's going to get stopped. No, he didn't get stopped. They actually let him say the line. But it was funnier without the line. Yeah? Just saying. Well, what can I say, ladies and gentlemen? That's it, really. I waffled on way too long about this film, especially when I weren't supposed to have much to say. It looks like I'm going to actually have to do a proper review of this when it comes out. Side-by-side comparisons to the original it was seen. But, yeah, other than some cringe-worthy moments and some really shit dialogue that's been thrown in, and some somewhat disappointing renditions of scenes and moments from the original film, I must admit, overall, I still enjoyed the film. I can't help it. It's still a good film. I mean, I wouldn't be quick to rate it high. I know a lot of people are saying, "Oh, it's The Lion King. It's one of Disney's best. It's probably Disney's best live action adaptation of their own thing." And in some parts, I would agree in terms of the visuals, but I think for me, I still personally enjoyed Aladdin a little bit more, just because I think Will Smith as the genie was great, and I think that moments like that just made it more original and made it a better adaptation. This was definitely a more faithful adaptation, so I guess it has points in that department. But again, because it doesn't have that human element, it just felt a bit unnecessary. And at the end of the day, what's wrong with the original? So I know why they made the film, and I don't think the film's as pointless as we all believe it is, because again, they're trying to do their live action classics. But it is, I guess, a little pointless when you consider the fact that it's still not really live action. I mean, maybe some of the locations they filmed on were real, but then by definition alone, wouldn't Disney's Dinosaur be considered a live action? Anyway, I guess all I can say really is if you like The Lion King, you'll probably like this because it's pretty much the same film. But if you're very partial and passionate about the original, like I am, you might not be too satisfied with the film. I remember enjoying the experience, and then when I left the cinema, still pretty much being in a Lion King mood. I remember going home, it was probably about 2 in the fucking morning by the time I got in, and yet I still couldn't wait to play the original. So I guess at the very least, if it does anything, it maybe introduces an unknowing audience to the original. But even so, just re-release the original, in my opinion. I'm sorry, it's not going to win. Despite everything I've said, I still don't think it should have been made. I can see why they've done it, I just still don't 100% agree with it. At the end of the day, they're not redoing every single classic, are they? So it's probably one they could have missed. But either way, it was nice to see it. It was enjoyable. Go watch it, but don't expect anything too different. And all I'll turn around and say is, out of a 5-star rating, I guess I'd probably give it a 3. Bearing in mind I give the original a 5, because it's actually really, really good. But this one fell flat in a bit too many places for me. And just the fact that it's pretty much a pointless remake. Not as pointless as the Psycho remake back in the day, but, shot for shot with Vince Vaughn in it. But still a bit pointless in my eyes overall. So, not a bad film, but not really a necessary one. So, I give it 3 out of 5 for now. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video as much as I have. Take care, hoppers, and I'll see you next time. It's too hot today. Oh, shit. Nala? Oh, alright. Alright. Take it easy. I think I know why you're here. Look, I didn't mean to make you sound like a slut. I was just saying that you're just trying. Alright, well, just give me a second to explain. I mean, look, it's not the end of the way. I can re-record it. Look, I'll re-record it now. Ah! Fuck! Oh!